Hello, my name's Vince Sheehan and I'd like to talk to you about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony with a particular focus on the musical structure of each of the four movements. Now of course this music needs little introduction. It's amongst the most famous pieces of music ever written. Just to illustrate this, I teach music in a primary school in London, and even with children as young as 6 or 7, if I just play them the opening idea, they recognise it and they're fascinated with it, and they often want to learn how to play it themselves. So this symphony has kind of seeped into our collective cultural DNA, a bit like the Mona Lisa and the works of Shakespeare. It's just part of our collective consciousness in the West. This is no doubt helped by its use in film, in advertising, in TV programmes. I was watching that episode of The Simpsons recently where Homer picks up Lisa's saxophone and he kind of sings into it. He goes, saxophone, saxophone, which is a really funny example, but it just goes to show that this that idea from this symphony, that four-note idea, da, 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 really is everywhere in our popular culture. Along with that, this music's always had these extra musical associations. That idea, da, 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 it's kind of a musical shorthand for the idea of struggle. It's been associated with Beethoven's personal struggle with his hearing loss, with the romantic idea of the individual against the forces of fate, and more recently in the Second World War, the Allies, the music was used to inspire them in their struggle against tyranny. So the music has this baggage with it, which comes with it. Also this life outside of itself, I suppose. Although the music begins in struggle, it doesn't end that way though. We begin in C minor, but we end in C major. So it's a journey in this music from darkness to light, which has always caught the imaginations of its listeners over the last 200 years, and indeed inspired others in their work. You might think of Mahler's Fifth Symphony, which has a similar trajectory from darkness to light, from despair to joy. So when was it composed? Well, it was composed in between 1804 and 1808, and it was premiered in this huge 4-hour concert on a freezing cold day in Vienna, along with many of other Beethoven's works, including his Sixth Symphony. And it must have been a real test of stamina for the musicians involved, the composer, indeed for the audience. But very early on, this symphony, the Fifth Symphony, was regarded as a supreme achievement by Beethoven. The sheer force of the music, the energy of the music really caught on, and a lot of that, I suggest, is down to its economy. It's such lean music, there isn't an ounce of fat on it. It's such a taut symphonic argument, and that contributes to the power of this music. So let's begin at the beginning. We have the first movement, which is in C minor in a regular sonata form, and here's the first subject in case you still don't know it. No sooner is that stated than already Beethoven's probing the idea of this four-note motif, testing its potential, seeing where he can take it. And indeed, it crops up again in the second subject, in the relative major. We hear a version of it on the horns. And underneath that lyrical idea, da, 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 ba, 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 we hear it again in the lower strings and the accompaniment. It really is everywhere in this movement. The Exposition's rounded off with a Codetta, again based on that idea, and then more often than not you'll hear the Exposition repeated. And then it's in the development we hear Beethoven's true obsession with this idea, because he just develops it to within an inch of its life. He's like a dog with a bone. He can't let go of this 4-note idea, and it's just passed around the orchestra through various keys. And eventually he reaches a kind of crisis point, an impasse with these grinding chords between the woodwinds and strings. Recapitulation in C minor. Here Beethoven does something wonderful. He pauses the recapitulation, and we hear this mournful, eloquent soliloquy on the solo oboe. And then the recapitulation carries on as if nothing had happened. And whatever, just carries on. It's one of those magical moments in this symphony. It's one of the only times, I think, in the symphony, particularly in the first movement, where we have this freedom and this air, this space all of a sudden. It really is a very original and wonderful moment. The recapitulation carries on as you'd expect. First subject, second subject, Codetta, and then we go into the Coda, where there's more music of struggle, and there's one bit of it I think reminds me of someone trying to get up a hill. It's like this. So that brings the first movement to a close. The second movement, in contrast, is a theme and a double theme and variations. We hear two contrasting themes which each time they're presented are altered slightly. The first theme, which I'm going to call A, is the noble melody we hear on the violas and cellos. It goes like this. So that's theme A. In contrast to that, we hear this more military-like idea on the brass, which goes like this in C major. So listen for those themes as each time they come round. There's sometimes some quite lengthy transition material as well to link those two ideas, which is based on the B theme. I'll put the exact form in the description below. We then move on to the scherzo, which starts in a rather ghostly fashion in the lower strings. And then, coupled with that in the A section, we hear this rather warlike idea on the horns. Very distinctive. And again, notice how similar that idea is to da 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 from the first movement. It kind of gives the work a unity when you hear how there's these relations, thematic relations between the movements. I suppose the scherzo is the kind of is again the darkness in this work, kind of threatening to pull this work down. The trio's a real contrast though. It goes like this on the lower strings. And so on and so forth. A rather busy idea. And then we come back to the A section again. Dum 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 dum. This time pizzicato, very quiet, quite spooky actually. Sometimes you might get the complete A and B sections repeated. I think that was in Beethoven's original autograph score, but I think it was actually published where we just have a reprise of the A section in this pizzicato version, and I always prefer hearing it that way actually. So we've got A, B, A1, and then another stroke of originality, kind of Beethoven's genius. We have a coda in the scherzo, but it also acts as a bridge to the final movement. So we're groping around in the darkness here. And then we're into the fourth movement. It's such a wonderful moment, so original. We're in this kind of dark, we're kind of groping around in the gloom in the third movement at the end there in that coda, and through that transition, that segue, we're suddenly into the blazing daylight of the final movement in C major. It really is glorious. And we just heard the first subject. Dum dum da 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 da. There's also this transition idea. Notice that appoggiatura there. Very easy to miss when you listen to it, but quite distinctive. And then we come into the second subject, which is based on these triplets. Very jolly, very jubilant. And in the second subject group we have an additional idea. Goes like that. Then the exposition's repeated. Dum 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 dum. Back to then into the second subject group, and then we reach the development in this movement, which is largely based on the second subject group, and then we have another stroke of Beethoven's genius. We come to the end of the development. Surely victory is in our hands. Surely. You know, the forces of darkness have been defeated. But then we suddenly have, it's almost as if there's a sting in the tail, and we go back to this idea from the third movement. So on and so forth. It's really remarkable. Beethoven suddenly pulls us back. Things aren't so certain. But then, no sooner as that's finished, we're back to the radiant glory of the recapitulation. And so on and so forth. And first subject, second subject, transition, second subject group, and then into this wonderful, rousing coda, including this idea, which I think's Richard Strauss would have been proud of. It's a really heroic idea. Always makes me smile when I hear that. And the music comes, the symphony comes this jubilant, triumphant close. It is a wonderful symphony, and even if you are over familiar with it, listen to it again. Perhaps try and follow it through like I enjoy doing, following the structure through as you listen to it, and see if perhaps you can break through this carapace of over familiarity. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll have a listen to this symphony and truly enjoy it. Thank you.